It's like book club, but it's more than books, and it's not quite a club. How do we feel about talking animals? And if you did have a talking animal sidekick, what would it be?
I only accept talking animals when they're voiced by Eddie Murphy. Wushu for life.
Yeah. As far as my animal sidekick, I kind of just wish my dog could talk because she is with me all the time anyway.
You see, to me, in books, when I interact with a talking animal, when I come across a talking animal, there is the point where it's either going to be okay and I'm going to live, or I'm going to be pulled out immediately, and this is the dumbest thing I've ever read in my entire life, make it have a point. Like, some animals are allowed to talk. I think that Wilbur in Charlotte's Web is allowed to talk. I think very validly needs to talk. Does Mogget and Sabriel really need to talk? Because to me, I was happy that Mogget was talking, if only because Sabriel was by herself for so much of the first half of the book that we needed some other form of dialogue, because or else it would just be Sabriel doing what Sabriel does.
I think 2 points. One, I feel like you kind of answered your own question in the sense that this is screenwriting more so 101, but like in writing in general, it gets boring when you're just in a character's head for so long. And because Sabriel is by herself for so long, we have to have her talking to somebody else. But also, I think that it is an oversight to act like Mogget is just a cat. Because Mogget's got some crazy shit going on by the end of the book.
Absolutely wild lore, yeah.
Anyways, welcome to Story Stack. Today, we are talking about Sabriel by Garth Nix, one of the coolest, most unheard of fantasy books from the 90s.
Being very invested in YA from a young age, I am so surprised that I'd never heard of Sabriel before. I'm pretty sure I've seen this cover before, and maybe in passing have heard it mentioned. It never stuck. I am so surprised considering that this book is popular. It's not a hidden gem. Like, it has a fan base. It has sold a lot of copies, made a lot of money. People are obsessed with it. And how did I not know that it existed? I mean, I would wonder how, because I got it from it's your copy, Ansley.
Mm-hmm. We're having our own little mini book club with Sabriel.
Yes, Gabriel and I have both read Ansley's copy of Sabriel. How did you even come across this book? Was this in an authentic way?
This was in my favorite way. Shout out the Stacks, one of Savannah's best little hidden gem local bookstores.
Please sponsor us.
Please sponsor us, Cindy. No, it was a blind date with a book from the Stacks. On the paper that they covered it with, it said that it was like a fantasy. It was from the 90s. And then the little like blurb was that this book has a cult classic and nobody knows that it exists. It was something along those lines of like 100% what you're saying. It's so popular. It for good reason. It is such a good book. And I'm so curious if with the internet now, had it been released in a more modern time in the same way, if it would have been like the next greatest big thing in fantasy, simply because more people would have had access to it. I really think that it might have just been in the 90s, it got buried.
Well, if I could like interject into that, I've been doing some thinking about the era in which Sabriel came out. And you have to draw the immediately obvious conclusion that it came out around the same time as Harry Potter. Harry Potter was a huge shift in fantasy storytelling. Before Harry Potter, most fantasy novels looked a lot like Sabriel. Sabriel is post-industrial revolution, but it's very much esoteric magic, whereas Harry Potter is structured magic. It is wizards who cast specific spells and do specific things, whereas Sabriel is like otherworldly magic. And I do think that Sabriel got kind of caught up in a cultural shift of how we talk about fantasy and magic. It was a bygone of a different storytelling time.
There's also a lot to say about having a female protagonist also kind of be this leader of this sort of magic system that we don't necessarily have exact rules or reasons why things work the way they do, but not in a careless way like Garth Nix doesn't know why or how things are working. It doesn't seem like, this spell works now because I say it does and this spell doesn't. It's like, no, you don't need to get down into the nitty gritties of it. This spell does this. And if I say it does this, then it's going to do that. And but it's not like, there's kind of convenient like structure to it, but there's not a like power structure, like how powerful things are. That really varies. There is a structure to it, but the power of it kind of gets a little jumbled. I don't think I even fully understand the magic system of Sabriel, and I don't think I had to enjoy the book. I feel like if you read the whole Old Kingdom trilogy and the continuations that Garth Nix has written in the Old Kingdom, that you would probably understand a lot more about this magic system. But I think the point is that you don't have to know the rules to experience the rules and enjoy the rules.
I think 2 points to that. First, considering this, we've already said that this is like was kind of buried. This is a hidden gem sort of book. I feel like it might be relevant to give a quick 30-second just what this is, because we're already referencing the bells and the Old Kingdom. Chances are most of the people listening to this have no idea what we're talking about yet. So it's a quick. Sabriel is about a teenage girl named Sabriel. Her dad is the person. This is a person in this world who can communicate and guide the dead to their resting place, but his main job is actually keeping the dead dead. He makes sure that spirits aren't called back to do nefarious purposes, basically. He goes missing, and Sabriel goes on this quest to save him from wherever he's being held in the realm of death, and along the way, like, encounters all of these different spirits that have been risen for bad purposes, a prince that was lost that we'll get into later, a cat named Mogget who ends up not being a cat but is actually an incredibly powerful being just bound in the cat's body. There's a whole little cast of characters that are all incredibly unique, incredibly witty and funny in the writing of the book, but essentially it is Sabriel goes on a quest to save her dad, and in the process becomes the new Abhorsen necromancer type being in this world. As a second point to the magic system in the Old Kingdom, I think one of the things that stuck out to me so much and made it so unique is the fact that it's somewhat sentient. Like, it's another force in their universe that is not just something you say a certain spell or like wave a wand and you can just do whatever you want with it. The bells, the entire charter system in this world, you have to respect it. And even if you do, there's a chance that it's not going to want to listen to you and it's going to do what it wants. And I think it was just such a cool way of writing it that makes it in a way where, like, you don't fully have to understand why something didn't work if the explanation is just the charter didn't want it to.
And thus, the readers don't get disappointed when things don't work, or they don't get disappointed when Sabriel doesn't choose a specific method for something. Because while Sabriel might not necessarily have this strict structure, Harry Potter does, and Harry Potter makes no sense sometimes. So there is a benefit to not having these sort of like hard, like these rigid rules.
To the point of it being a benefit of not being super structured, I also think it means that Garth Nix couldn't really write himself into a hole or like back himself into a corner with the magic system. Because I think that that's really easy to write yourself into a corner when you're writing fantasy with magic that's like a really heavily structured magic system. And that just never was the case in Sabriel.
It's also really easy to have a structured magic system and then get in the weeds with it where it's hard to enjoy the book. And Garth Nix probably has a structure to this, probably knows a lot more about the magic system than we do. We didn't need to know it. And so we don't get bogged down by this world building. The beautiful thing about Sabriel is that it is, I think I saw 90,000 words somewhere. That is relatively short for a fantasy book. And this is YA fantasy, but it doesn't talk down to its readers by any means. I think this is a sort of timeless or ageless book that you can enjoy because the prose it's not trying to be a YA book, at least the way that we understand them. What surprises me, though, is that when Sabriel came out, YA wasn't this sort of massive genre that it is now. Like YA has only grown and gotten more popular, and it's morphed and kind of changed to be like a variety of different things. YA was still establishing itself, and I am so surprised that in a world where YA and specifically YA fantasy is blowing up, that Sabriel is not pulled from the 90s trenches and brought up as like this amazing gem. Like, why? I'm surprised that we haven't refound it. Maybe it made sense that we didn't rediscover it in the 2010s, but like YA fantasy is a big genre, and I'm surprised we're not talking about it more. I'm surprised that when I was 14 looking for my next big fantasy pick, as I was getting obsessed with things like Cassandra Clare and The Mortal Instruments, and reading things like Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, and reading things like, I don't know, a lot of things, fantasy things. And those books are good. And I was reading the popular things that were good. And this is a thing that was popular, that was good, that I hadn't heard about. And I'm just so endlessly surprised by that.
And I think right now, maybe that should be our mission with this episode of like, you should read Sabriel if you like fantasy, regardless of the age gap. Because I agree that it might be categorized technically as a YA fantasy, but it is so ageless. I think that has a lot to do with how the romance is written, but we'll get back into that in a minute. But I think with the current YA fantasy market and fantasy market in general, so many books are comparing themselves to other books, and it almost just puts us in this like circular echo chamber when it comes to like how a story is being developed. I'm so sick of seeing books that are literally like the first line in the summary is like, for fans of this book meets this book. Like, it's just, I want something unique and original that might still be in this genre, but is an original, unique idea that I haven't seen before. And that's what Sabriel was. I've never seen a magic system that worked like this. And the way that the plot progresses, I would argue, is something different, because it's not, I mean, I know that the reluctant hero is a standard story formatting and we see it over and over again, and it is done in different ways. But I feel like Sabriel sort of broke that format a lot, because it sort of starts that way and then very quickly moves away from that formula.
To give a little bit of a autopsy, I guess, of why it's not being resurfaced today, I personally think it has 100% to do with how weird the book is. A lot of the popular YA that I see today, especially things that resurface, like Percy Jackson, for example. No shade on Percy Jackson. I actually quite enjoyed reading the first book like I did recently. It just explains everything. Like, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in Percy Jackson, but it all gets explained. Like, these are the gods, these are the powers, this is the magical camp, so on and so forth. Whereas in Sabriel, there is just a whole bunch of stuff that isn't explained, but doesn't need to be, because the world is supposed to be weird, because it's supposed to be unknown, because we're supposed to be following these characters in a world that is strange and beautiful in its own strangeness. And I just don't think that mentality is copacetic to a modern reader, and especially to a modern young adult reader.
I agree with you with like what makes Sabriel weird, but I almost feel like that's why modern readers should pick it up, because it's so unique in that point. To me, I was just constantly struck by how real it felt, regardless of like how crazy the plot is and like magical elements. You have, this wall that separates the landmass, and north of the wall lives like it's still the medieval era with kings and queens, and there's like hidden pockets of magic everywhere, and it's all very like feral and wild there. And then south of the wall, it's the like post-industrial revolution. Like, we have there's like a president, or like there's a leader that is not a king, and like we're moving past that. There's a democracy established. But it never delves into those things. It establishes that those exist. That's what this world is like. But we're only focused on Sabriel, and that's how we live our lives. Like, in the real world, there's everything going on all the time. And if we stopped to explain it all, we would like never stop explaining things. And so I feel like the fact that it gives us this, but then this is what we're focusing on, and we only bring up other things when they're relevant to what's happening with Sabriel's plot, is why it feels so much more grounded to me. And I think that it could be a very good disruptor for the current industry.
Not to mention, this book got popular in the 90s. It'd be one thing if this book never blew up, but this book was popular. It did draw readers in despite its maybe obscure premise and this sort of not very cleanly explained world. And I wonder about more reasons why this book might not appeal to the modern YA market. When I was reading it, at least, I was very... And it's the writer in me that is noticing this. Not that I feel like a reader would be pulled out, because it's not something that pulls most people out. It's something that would pull people in. And it's this sort of... The prose of this seems so built out and mature, and it's written in a way that doesn't talk down, that I had to stop and be so surprised and read a sentence again and be like, this is a YA paragraph description, and yet these metaphors are amazing. And it's not poetic. To call it poetic is almost saying that it's super flowery, and it's not in that sort of way. But it is very, immersive. The descriptions are so involved that the reader can't help but feel that they are also feeling these sort of things, and in a fresh way. Like, these aren't cliches. These are it's a new lens. It feels like Garth Nix is truly making us see the world through Gabriel.
I knew it was going to happen. There's one letter that separates my name from Sabriel, and I knew it was going to happen.
Okay. Yes. Sorry about that. Sorry, Sabriel. Love you. It feels like we are truly seeing the world through Sabriel's lens, the only way that Sabriel could see things. She is the only one that is as thinking of a river in this way. She is the only one that is describing the way that her falling is feeling. Like, it is so no other book could be written from Sabriel's perspective. It is so Sabriel in the way like that it's written. And I think that this current YA market, it feels a lot simpler to me. And I was originally thinking of this as a bad thing, that we are dumbing books down and YA has lost its poetry and its beautiful, unique metaphors and this sort of ageless aspect that YA was clearly harnessing in Sabriel. But I'm not quite sure that that's a bad thing, but I'm wondering like what your thoughts are on the sort of prose of Sabriel, what you thought reading it. Were you being pulled out by this sort of thing that pulls you in?
Pretentious analysis incoming. When I read through Sabriel, I remember having the exact thought to myself of, I think Garth Nix is a student of Hemingway, in the sense that it's not a very prose-heavy book. Like you said, I wouldn't call it poetic. However, much like was Hemingway's whole ideal with writing of it's what's not being said. It's what's in between the lines. And I felt like Garth Nix was really good with his writing at exactly that, of these crazy, insane, magical concepts that you're not supposed to understand, and just kind of giving basic descriptions of them, but not in a bad writer kind of way, in a, I'm intentionally describing it this way to let you fill in the gaps in your own head.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. It was all so intentional, and I think that Garth Nix had like such a masterful control over all of the language that he used in the book. And I think Lily, you nailed it with the idea that like nobody else could write a book from Sabriel's perspective. Beyond just the idea of like only Garth Nix really knows Sabriel as a character, but just the idea of the way that he wrote her voice, I don't think any other author could replicate in that way.
That being said, because it is so Sabriel, I think that it sort of ostracizes itself from other books because I think one thing that people like about the current YA space, I think the current readership space, is reliable forms of characters, reliable tropes, and this sort of understanding that what you get here, you can get in another book as well. We like these sort of tropey romances, and YA is also heavy on like just different tropes. And there is a comfort in that I think the current market space likes. And it's how we are marketing books now. A lot of book marketing is based on tropes. And it's okay to want to read the same character, even though two authors are writing it and they feel super similar, because it brings you comfort. Romance books, very formulaic, but there's nothing wrong with wanting the comfort of knowing that you're going into this and you're getting a happy ending, knowing that it's Grumpy Sunshine and that they're going to end up together in the end. I don't think there's something wrong with that. It's harder to get a current market to be willing to branch into something unknown like Sabriel. How you can't describe it as romantasy. There might be romance in it, but it's so light. And the character is so strange that I can't think of another character like Sabriel, but that also is probably because the world is so strange that only Sabriel is existing in this world at this time with this scenario. There's so many pieces that make Sabriel not just a trope.
I agree with you that there is a comfort in tropey writing and formulaic approaches and knowing kind of what to expect from a genre. But I mean, we've sort of had this conversation of I know we're in the same, me and you, Lily, pattern of like reading a classic and then needing like a tropey romance as a palate cleanser. Like I think all of these books exist for a purpose to each reader. I don't know that means that this current market is unprepared for something like Sabriel, though. I think that the YA market got formulaic and tropey because they saw that it was working, because there is an obvious appeal to those things. But I don't think the fact that those are the books that are being published and purchased means that those are the only books that should be published and purchased by this audience. I think that Sabriel is firmly a fantasy. Definitely not a romantasy, because you're right that the romance is so minimal in this book. But I also think that as far as wanting a character similar, there are more books to the Old Kingdom series, and those provide you... One of the things that I really liked about it is that all of them can kind of be read as standalones. Obviously, starting with Sabriel to get the most world building is the best place to start, but beyond that, all of the other ones can kind of be read on their own. And because of that, you get a strong cast of characters in every book that are not the same characters every time. So like the next book switches to a character named Lyriel that you meet for the first time. You learn her world. It exposes a whole different part of the Old Kingdom that Sabriel doesn't touch on really at all. And so I think that reading this book, if you want similar characters, that's why there's so many Old Kingdom books.
Let me ask you this, Lily, as somebody who is actively trying to enter the YA space, who's trying to get books published in this space. Have you, especially after finishing Sabriel, started shifting or formulating ideas on how you want to enter that space where the market trends are saying we want tropes and predictability, yet, here is an example of a book that is not tropes and not predictability, and it's awesome?
Reading Sabriel reminded me that good prose is going to stand out regardless of if there's tropey stuff happening. It reminded me that I don't have to write down in YA. There is nothing too there's nothing too large that a young reader won't be able to comprehend, and it's okay if they have to break it down a little bit. There were definitely some lines where I'm like, are 14-year-olds reading this truly grasping this? Are they putting these pieces together? But it's also okay if they're not. There's something to continually get from it as you read the book, however closely you read it, you're getting something new from it the closer you read it, but also reading it kind of farther back is okay. To me, I think that, yeah, we're talking Sabriel's been maybe buried in the 90s. And does that mean like something like that wouldn't rise now? I think in an agent's inbox right now, that is going to stand apart so much more than this dry, cliche, tropey books. And those books are going to get published. Those tropey books are always going to get published. But my odds of being picked out, if I'm writing one of those tropey books, seems so much less than if I write a really interesting book with very intelligent prose and this sort of extreme control of a world that is mostly about like, oh my goodness, I think a book like Sabriel would rise to the top of an agent's list. And I would love to write a book like Sabriel. And I feel like if I wrote this, I would feel very comfortable putting it in an agent's inbox, regardless of if it doesn't have the tropes that are right. Because an agent might not know that they are looking for something exactly like this. And because it is so well written and so well constructed and thought out, it's going to look good. Tahira Mafi is the author of the very popular Shatter Me series, has also written other things. Like I think most currently she's writing This Woven Kingdom, whatever the trilogy, or no, it's not a trilogy, whatever the series is called for that is actively being released. Like the last book still hasn't come out yet. I want to say we don't even have a date for the last book. I want to say the 4th book comes out this fall. And I want to say there could be more. She said, and I want to say it was just a live stream of questions that I happened to be watching. And this isn't a fresh, unique take that no author has ever thought of before. But it's what got me thinking about like the way that you go about writing a good book that stands apart from tropey books. And that is characters are complex. And no character is not complex. That side character is complex. Now, that doesn't mean that you add that complexity to the story. But the fact that you have this awareness that these aren't just NPCs in a world that are meant to behave a certain way. And yes, you are using them as tools to push your plot forward, but it has to be with intention, and there has to be a depth there, even if it is just briefly implied depth and not, even if it's just briefly implied depth. Complexity is important, and that is what makes Sabriel, that is what makes the prose good, is because there is this awareness that Sabriel is a complex character that is going to see and experience the world in this complex way. And all the things around her are equally as complex, even if they're not bogging down the quick pace of the story with their complexity.
So sort of pivoting from that point back to, could Sabriel exist in the current YA market? How is it different? I think one of the things that really makes it stand out is the romance and how that's developed. Because I feel like with most series now that are intended to be a series but could kind of exist as standalones, I think are normally pitched as standalones with series potential, is how the market works now. A lot of them, if there is a romance, you're going to know by the end of book 1. Chances are the romance going to start developing before the book ends. We're moving that way. From my memory, Sabriel doesn't do that. It introduces Touchstone, but it doesn't. And there's the implication by the end of the book that it's going somewhere, but I don't remember it actually beginning in this book.
There was a part of me that thought Mogget was going to be the love interest. Not going to lie.
You have been so YA pilled, dead animals turning into lovers. Crazy. Listen,
Mogget is kind of insane though, and like there's something about like a powerfully like untamed being that is like, wait a second.
Lily's like, I can fix him.
She could fix him.
I really could, honestly, fix Mogget, and it'd be perfectly fine. Now, of course, we'd have to figure the whole, like, bound to a cat body situation. That's not great, but, like, once we fix that, everything's fine. If you can get bound to be a cat, you can get bound into a hot man. It's okay.
The magic is unknowable. You can't control the magic, okay? This isn't Harry Potter. You can't wave your wand, turn somebody into a cat.
Mogget is powerful enough that he can probably control it. But you are so right about the fact that this romance, the actual introduction of Touchstone, and I mean, if you knew from the beginning that Touchstone was a hidden prince, like this forgotten prince, you would be immediately, oh, love interest. Of course. Because of course the forgotten prince is the love interest. That's kind of dumb. That's kind of tropey. But you don't know that until their relationship has kind of already slowly developed into something. Now, I didn't honestly care for the romance. I could have left it behind. Their sort of attraction to each other seems... I think I've heard that with a closer read, it feels a lot more intentional and soft and slow, and like you were really noticing things budding between the two. But it felt so stilted for me. Like the first moment that I want to say we're in Touchstone's head, because this book isn't written in just like first person POV or third person limited. It is written in third person omniscient. You are getting into multiple heads. The first time we're in Touchstone's head and he has the thought, I'm realizing that Sabriel is a woman. That just felt so strange to me, where some people are like, well, that's planting the seeds of the romance. But there are bigger fish to fry. Sabriel's got to go into like the realm of the dead and go save her father. Why are we talking about her? And she's not generally sexualized. This isn't Touchstone sexualizing her. But I feel like there's bigger things we need to do.
But I kind of feel like the idea that there are bigger fish to fry is what Sabriel and Touchstone are thinking anyway. That's when I read it, I feel like by the end, the question is up in the air of like, will they or won't they? But it's such a background question to everything else that's gone on that it's okay to be a question, because it again goes back to the idea that Sabriel felt so real to me and grounded in reality. And sometimes that is your relationship with people in a work environment or a class environment, or just meeting somebody that kind of unexpectedly comes into your life while other things are going on. Like you have these, okay, this is everything we have to do. This is insane. I'm getting my bells together to go into the realm of the dead and try to save my dad, sort of thing. And then having that small moment where like your subconscious realizes like, well, this guy I'm traveling with is kind of cute, actually. And I'm not unattracted to him, but I can't really think about that right now because I got bigger fish to fry. That's how the romance developed to me.
You know, you're actually right. I think that I enjoyed Sabriel's thought process here. Sabriel, her going through her feels and everything felt really real to me. It was Touchstone's sort of character that I think was pulling me out just a little bit at the beginning. He's just so weird in like a good way, but he is, you know that he's keeping secrets from you. And then I'm like, why are we in his head? I don't like the fact that he's keeping secrets from me. And his name is Touchstone. There's something about that name that is also like just so strange.
Hey, I can chime in on this one. There's a weird thing going on with this book. So Touchstone, the name, is a reference to a character in Shakespeare's As You Like It. And I think Garth Nix was pulling character elements from Shakespeare's Touchstone for the Touchstone in this book. I don't know why. I don't know what the point is. It's very odd to name a character Touchstone because that is a direct reference to Shakespeare in a book that is seemingly its own world, completely disconnected from anything Shakespeare. But yeah, that was a weird artistic choice. But that hopefully clarifies a little of the strangeness going on with that character.
A good thing about Touchstone, I mentioned the quote where he's thinking, like, I'm realizing that Sabriel is a woman. But that's kind of the extent of it. It's not this, like, over-sexualized view of Sabriel. And that is an element that I really enjoyed about the romance between them. Because if it had gotten really sexualized, it would have been kind of ridiculous and unrealistic. And I probably would have gotten, like, really just upset. Like, come on. And it would have ruined the quick pacing of this book. We don't have time for a romance full beat. Like, we just have time for moments. And it was really the moments as they were woven in that make the romance what it is, which isn't significant or substantial. And I wouldn't have a reader go into it expecting some, like, grand love story. But I am, like, more and more, like, agreeing with Ansley as far as this is kind of just a real love story in an insane world. And the world is cool. Their love is pretty normal.
I think 2 points with that. First, just before we move on, but as far as like current market similar beats, I would argue that I feel like it's actually very similar to Percy and Annabeth, just in a different context. Because with them, like it's a slow friends to lovers because they're 12 when they meet, and they almost like don't even have the capacity yet to realize or even feel attraction in that way. And so that's something slow that builds, that by the end of the first book, I don't think you have the immediate thought of like, will they or won't they? But that slowly builds into the next 2 or 3 books before it's like established. With this, it's almost the same idea of like, they don't have the capacity to recognize attraction because of everything else going on. And so I feel like it's the same phenomenon, just in different contexts. There we go. That's the plural form of that word. But the second point too is, I think it ties back to Gabriel's point earlier of Garth Nix is very Hemingway, and the idea of like reading between the lines and only giving you the scenes and the information that you really need to understand what's going on. Because while it ends with them in this sort of like will they, won't they position in this book, the next book in the series starts with them married, having children, years have passed, and that second book focuses on the next generation. And so it's kind of the same thing of like their romance in the grand scheme of the Old Kingdom plot line wasn't integral to what was happening. And so it's kind of left on the sidelines of the story. It's referenced, it's mentioned, it's established, but it's not drawn out and put on display because it's not part of the story. And in the second book, it does seem more natural. Like there's a shift in both of their characters where you can tell they are in love, they've married out of love, they have a partnership. And so I think it's just another cool, unique point of Garth Nix's writing.
And bringing it back to the writing, just because this book has this sort of mature prose that doesn't dumb it down, I don't think that current YA that is written simpler is bad because of that. One like real takeaway that I had after reading it, after kind of being kind of upset at modern YA because how did we lose this? How do we lose such great imagery and characterization? Like it was really upsetting to me. I realized that YA has expanded so much since Garth Nix wrote Sabriel and since the Old Kingdom was started, that now there is room for more kinds of prose. It's allowed to be simpler, and I think the simpler prose is necessary to get people into YA. And maybe in the 90s, it would have been you had more jumps from children's literature to adult literature, and then you get something in the middle that's YA, but that's still kind of high. Now there is a more gradual introduction from children to adult. You can have a lot more beats in between that help you get to the mature writing. You're not just given children's books and then expected to read at an adult level. And for that, I do appreciate simpler prose. But Garth Nix did something really great here with Sabriel that deserves to be honored and respected, and I think stands apart from simple prose.